The dog can move his front feet.
Mark flight.
He can mark flight of birds, but he can't move his back feet. If he moves his back feet that much, he's out. He's disqualified.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. And the entry fee for this trial is $1,200.
Yeah.
You better have some good dogs.
The award-winning Tennessee WildCast is on the air with the latest on hunting, fishing, boating, wildlife watching, and all things outdoors. Make welcome your host, drummer and outdoor expert novice, Jason Harmon.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this edition of Tennessee WildCast. Hey, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for watching. We've got a great show for you today. We're in a little bit different location. It's going to be really cool. A lot of history here. We are at the Ames Plantation. And I have Miss Amy Spencer helping me co-host today. Amy, thanks for being here.
And we're going to talk about bird dogs.
Yes, bird dogs and all kinds of stuff. The history here is crazy. We have Dr. Carlisle with us to help us understand all this and learn about what goes on here, and it should be fun. Thanks for setting it up, and thank you for being here.
Welcome. You're welcome.
Well, we're getting ready to enter that time of the year down here where it's our Super Bowl.
Absolutely.
And it's the 121st running of the National Championship.
And it's been held here continuously since 1915.
And explain a little bit about that, because it first ran in 1896 in West Point, Mississippi. So how did it end up here as a permanent home?
And what is a field trial? So folks know.
Yeah. Sorry, this is my passion, so I forget that sometimes.
Well, let's back up. Field trials essentially started when one fella said, "My dog's better than yours." And so it was just a comparison. They put the dogs on the ground, and initially they started foot hunting, and then this gradually increased or grew until you had short running dogs and that they were following on horseback, and then you had big running dogs that were followed on horseback, and that's what we do at Ames Plantation. Is we're following the all-age dog, which is the big running dogs.
Okay.
I've heard some people compare them to the Indianapolis 500 racers, where they go into a field and they make a cast around each field and continue on. And the theory was that the big all-age dogs can point and find as many birds on horseback, covering 10 times the territory as a shooting dog and as a foot hunting dog can on the ground, covering every square foot. So that was the theory behind my dog's better than yours, and we'll do mine on horseback, and we'll follow it, and let's go. So they started the national championship started in West Point, Mississippi in 1896, and right after that, a smallpox outbreak forced it to move. And when it did, they missed the following year. And then they moved it to North Mississippi, where they picked up, and they ran it south of Grand Junction for a couple of years, and then they ran it in West Tennessee some, and it came to Ames Plantation in there somewhere around 1902, and they ran it for a few years, and then lo and behold, in 1905, Mr. Ames had a dog that was actually qualified to run in the National, and lo and behold, his dog won the National Championship. Well, when your dog wins on your grounds, everybody immediately thinks a little home cooking's involved there.
Going on.
Still to this day.
Yeah. So it infuriated Mr. Ames because he felt that he had won that that trial outright. And so he just made the statement that should he ever host the field trials on these grounds again, that he would not compete his dog. And he held true to his word because it was held here several more times until 1915. And he did not compete his dog. And then it came here as a permanent home in 1915. And Mr. Ames became a judge, and he judged it for over 22 years. So
and still, he didn't run his dogs then.
He did not compete his dogs on his grounds ever again. Now that's a pretty hard, bitter pill to swallow, if you will.
Well, he had the ultimate playground. He could run them anytime he wanted to, I guess, couldn't he?
Absolutely. So it was really good. I think it is that he had one national champion, and that dog was a setter named Allan Ball. And we have a painting of that dog in the manor house here, so that's unique.
Yeah, it is. So you've given us a little bit of history, but what's some of the other things that stand out in your mind about the history of the national championship that this is national, which stands out to me. I didn't realize it was the national championship, which is the big deal.
Well, it's also international.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Because we have owners, dogs that come out of Canada. We've also had dogs from Japan. We had one dog several years ago that Robin Gates handled, and it was I forget the name of the dog, but I always made the announcements of the handler and the owner of the dog and the name of the dog at the beginning of the national for many years. And the owner of this dog was Okira Maruki from Sioux City, Japan. Now, the first time I looked at that, how do you pronounce that? And so I went to Robin. Now, you'd have to know Robin Gates to appreciate him. Robin's a big man. He stands about 6'6", and a pretty good-sized fella. And so I asked Robin, I said, how do you say that name? And he just looked at me and he says, Doc, I have no idea. I just call him Kawasaki. So there we go. But it's an international competition.
Wow. Hey, I'm going to remind you, you're getting close to that lamp.
I understand.
Yeah, we got a lecture. We got a little lecture when we got here earlier about these lamps.
We're looking at the oldest piece of furniture in the Ames Manor House. This is a table that came out of a monastery in Europe, and it actually has weevil holes in it. And before fumigates were developed, they say during Mr. Ames's day that he would sprinkle granular arsenic down into the hole.
Quit touching it. Don't look at
to kill the weevils. And
well, you're worrying me about the lamps because you've bumped it twice now. So
yes, these lamps are very special. I guess the lampshades are the most special.
Yeah.
They were completely restored by Christine Young out of Nashville several years ago, but they've been appraised at a little over $20,000.
Yes, so we do not want to knock those off the table.
They are special. They are special.
I like as Don mentioned earlier, the vintage lighting.
Yeah, the vintage
there
lighting.
You go.
Vintage lighting in the house.
All right, we'll get back to field trials. One thing that people don't realize about the National, this is a 3-hour performance for the dog and the handler and the scout and the judges. And how much ground are they covering in these courses? Because we have separate courses. We have the morning course and the afternoon course. So explain a little bit to the...
Well, the entire plantation is 18,400 acres, and about 6,000 acres of that is devoted to the field trial courses, and that's a mixture of timber and row crop, and then you have some swampland involved in that, and then you've got roads and borders and what we call bear traps where nothing can get through it, and a lot of times a dog will get into that, and lo and behold, you won't get him back.
Yeah, the first course has a bear trap.
Yeah, just a little bit,
Yes.
just a little bit. So anyway, it's roughly 6,000 acres, and each course, we have them divided up into a morning course and an afternoon course, and each course is 11.5 linear miles in length. Now, this, as Amy just pointed out, this is a 3-hour heat. Most of the qualifying stakes are 1 hour, 2 hours at the most. This is an endurance stake. And so a dog will actually run somewhere between 22 to 25 miles in that 3-hour time period. So he has to be in perfect physical condition to be able to accomplish that. And the judges are looking for a dog that ends that 3 hours with the same energy and enthusiasm that he starts that 3 hours with.
And we've seen a lot of dogs over the years start out really good and make it to about that 2 hour, 45 minute, and then you start to see things go.
Yeah. Back in the mid-'80s, I saw a dog that made it 2 hours and 50 minutes, and he was winning it up to that point. And he just stopped and sat down, and that was it.
Wow.
The handler jumped off his horse and tried to rub him and get him to stand up, and had a towel and rubbed him, got all the water off of him, and, gave him just a little treat that he had in his pocket, and he jumped back on his horse and he hit his whistle and the dog sat down. And that was it. Pick him up. He's done.
Yeah.
Wow. So for the folks that don't know, what is the ultimate goal at the end of the trial? For the dog to be still rare and ready to go?
Absolutely.
Well,
absolutely.
What are they scored on? How are they?
Well, they're not actually scored. It is
very subjective judging.
Yes,
Okay.
But what the judges are looking for, we go by what is called the Amesian standards, which is a standard that Mr. Ames wrote. And what he's looking for, you're looking for a dog that has a lot of range, style, and character. and you want a dog that is happy at what he's doing. You want that tail popping. You want it up over his back instead of, if one's had a lot of pressure on him, that tail may be down or down between his legs, and he's not a happy camper doing what he's doing.
You want that high carrying tail when they're running.
Absolutely.
Good actors.
No, it's
maybe in some cases.
In some cases, yes, they're acting. In some cases, they're having a ball. That's something that they love. So there you go. They're looking for a dog that will range, and that, as I said earlier, that just finishes that 3 hours with that same energy and enthusiasm. He's supposed to be hunting the likely places on the course. He's not supposed to be running down the road.
Okay.
Not out in the middle of the field.
Don't want a field runner. Don't want it in the middle of one of these big row crop fields where there's not going to be any game out there. Now, today we have some grain sorghum fields out here, and the stubble that's left out there is probably 30 inches high or so, and you got to be careful. Dog going through the middle of that field, there may be a covey of birds
right in the
middle of the field.
We saw that.
Grain sorghum.
We've seen that multiple times.
And so when you have a dog that stops and points, the idea is he has the nose. You trust your dog. And there's some handlers that just can't do that or don't want to do that. But, the dog has the nose, and that's the reason we do this competition, is because the dog has the nose. And it's all about the dog. Yes, the handlers ride 3 hours, and they handle a dog, and the scouts are hunting for him. But the dog wins the championship. It's his performance in that 3 hours. And that's, we're judging, he may have a bad performance at the last trial that you were at, but you're judging his 3 hours today. This is a snapshot in time that you're looking at.
Not any of his previous performances. You're not going to be sitting there saying, well, I saw him at, the Alabama. He was doing this. And no, that's all wash. It's all fresh. It's all new. This performance only.
Yeah. Well, tell us, we've said this. It's the Super Bowl of bird dogging and trial, field trials. But what dogs are running? What breeds are mostly?
It's mostly English pointers and English setters. Now, when the field trials first started back in the late 1800s, it was mostly setters were winning, and they dominated up until after the 1900s and up to about 1920. There were a lot of setters that won, and the pointers gradually started taking hold, and you started having more and more win and more competing. And what it amounts to, I've heard several people size this up. The setters are more of an individual dog. They work for one person or one family, and they won't take a lot of pressure. But a pointer works sort of like a robot. He'll work for anybody. You'll find a few that are very specific.
I can think of one specific dog that's going to be in this national. He doesn't. But anyway.
But most of the time, a pointer will work for anybody. There's some cases, like I said, where you won't, but for the most part, anybody can handle that dog, and he'll go ahead and hunt, and he'll work, and he enjoys what he does. But it's English pointers and English setters, and just a few years ago, what was it? I think it was 2013, 2014, when Shadow Oak Bow won the national championship. That's a setter. Well, when he won that first year, everybody thought, this is an anomaly.
Right.
Because the last setter that won was Johnny Crockett in 1970. And you go back beyond that, in 1948, it was Mississippi Zev. And so, when you go back before that, it was back in the it was in the 20s when the setter won. So the setters are far and few in between, and so everybody thought, in 2013, Shadow Oak Bow was
it's fluke.
a fluke. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then he turned around and did it the next year.
Oh, wow.
In 2014. So he won back-to-back. Well, the last time a setter won back-to-back national championships was 1901 and 1902. So it was a long time, a very long time. So
that doesn't happen very often.
No, it does not.
I got to interject here. I know this isn't on our sheet, but we were talking about how pointers are like robots and they'll work for anybody. Well, there was a certain situation where you had a handler get sick here one year, and
absolutely.
John Rex had to fill in, and you can fill in from there, because I will have to say this man's memory is like a steel trap at field trials. Back when we were running on, February 15th, it was sunny and 65 like 20 years ago. So, and this dog did this on the 7th fine, So, anyway, but
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But John Rex had to end up filling in, never even handled the dog.
He had not been on a horse in a while, and he took the dog and he ran the dog.
And this was before cell phones, so someone actually had to go get John Rex, which was
Right.
my husband actually went and found him and said, John Rex, you got to get over there and handle him.
Dave Grubb was the handler, and he was put in the hospital in Jackson, Tennessee.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was a last-minute deal. And so John Rex handled the dog, and sure enough, that dog won. And there was one point during the trial when John Rex got out of pocket and nobody knew where he was. And that was when Roy Pelton handled the dog, and the dog had a fine. It was on the end of Cox's Ridge, toward the end of the 3-hour race. And he got off, and he flushed, and he flushed, and he flushed, and he couldn't get the birds up. And he looked back at the judge, and they says, why don't you try flushing right in front of the dog? Because he went out 20, 30, 40 feet out in front, and so he went right back in front of the dog, and birds went everywhere. And so he took the dog and went on, and then John Rex caught up at that point. But yeah, it's been unique.
So it sounds like the handler is a big part of it too. I mean,
Absolutely.
They're so. I'm new to this, so tell me what does the handler do specifically while he's on the horse, or he or she?
Yes,
Well, we've had
and he or
she.
she, and,
He or she.
and we've had some she's, we've had some females that have run dogs here, and so yes. But what they do is they'll take these dogs to begin with, and they train these dogs, and this is how they make their living. And so the owners are paying a boarding fee each month, and so he's training the dog, and then they'll enter a dog in a field trial, and when he turns the dog loose, then he's kind of guiding the dog. The dog may never have been on these grounds, and so this dog is always listening to this handler, and this handler will sing, calling to that dog just to where
And
he
each
knows
handler
where he
has
is.
their own unique sound.
Absolutely.
Even
Can we get an example? One of you? What does that unique sound like?
I'm a little bit different, but the guys are very deep vocal, but I kind of just sing a little hey, hey, and for my dog, or if my dog needs to change direction, it's a totally different cadence almost. It's a hey, 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 or something, or the name of the dog to get it to shift to, because you want them to bend with your voice and work. And you'll see these dogs a lot of times, they'll stop and they'll listen and then they'll just go because they're cueing off that handler.
But then when you get a dog that is out there a half mile to a mile away from the horse, and he has a hard time hearing you, that dog will stop and turn around, and he'll look at the handler, and whichever direction that horse is pointed is the direction that he'll go. So
always have your horse pointed in the direction before
that's
you
right.
start.
The handler's always you have to have
the horse set up so when the dog's turning to look, they know where they're going.
And so they go on, and when that dog finds a covey of birds, which is an upland game bird, he'll point, and the handler will come up. He'll dismount his horse, and he will walk by the dog, and he'll go out and try to flush the game out in front of the dog.
Okay.
And then once he flushes game, then in the trials that we have today, most of that there's not a bird taken. They shoot blanks, and so the handler will fire a shot in the air. And the reason he's firing a shot in the air is to where the judge can evaluate that dog's manners around his game. You don't want a dog that's gun shy or flinches or moves or lays down or runs off or anything like that.
Cowards. Okay.
So that dog has to stand there staunch, rigid, and not move. Now, when the birds flush,
and we really want high head and high tail.
You prefer
that's
high
what we
head.
want.
Yeah. Yes. You don't want one with a flat tail or a 9 o'clock tail. You'd prefer him to have a 12 o'clock tail or 11 o'clock tail. Just up to where he's looking good, doing what he's doing. But after the handler flushes, now the dog can move his front feet.
Mark flight.
He can mark flight of birds, but he can't move his back feet. If he moves his back feet that much, he's out. He's disqualified.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. And the entry fee for this trial is $1,200.
Yeah.
You better have some good dogs.
So
you better be listening.
You want a dog that stands there and does what he's supposed to do.
Well, you don't get to this level without years of training, without a lot of money. When I say thousands upon thousands tied up into these dogs, and what these dogs are worth to get here. On the market, if you were to buy a half qualified dog, you're looking at anywhere from $25,000 to $50,000. Because I know people that have turned down, and I know people that have turned down six figures for dogs that have actually been here and won.
Yes.
So these are high dollar dogs.
Yeah, that's out of my price range.
Yeah.
The first
and I
year-
do it on a state budget.
The first year I was here, first national championship I went through was 1982. And Heritage Premonition was the dog that won. And I just happened to be standing behind his owner, who was Jim Cohen from Ohio. And there was a guy standing beside Jim, and we were in front of the manor house out on the walkway. And when they announced Heritage Premonition, that guy turned to Jim and says, "I'll give you $30,000 for that dog right now." Well, here I come. I'm brand new to this stuff. I didn't know anything about bird dogs. I'm trying to learn. And here this guy offers this guy $30,000 for a dog, and I'm thinking, if it was mine, he'd die of heartworms tonight. It's just totally.
And it never fails that you turn down money for dogs.
Something's going to
something
happen.
happens.
Yeah.
I've been there. So anyway, but let's explain a little bit to people. I know how we get here. I know how hard it is to get here. But let's talk about the qualifying trials and how to get here.
There are 80 qualifying events in the United States and Canada right now. And for a dog to initially qualify, he has to have at least 2 first-place wins in any of those field trials anytime during his lifetime. Now, he may get his first win when he's 2 years old. He may not get his second win till he's 4 years old.
And we've had derbies qualify
Absolutely.
here too. So.
We've had dogs to get 2 wins in 1 year. And once they get those 2 wins, then they're automatically qualified to come here. Now, if they win it, they're automatically qualified to come back the next year.
Okay.
If not, then they have to have a placement, either a first, second, or third, or a champion or runner-up position to re-qualify to come back.
It's easier to get back here than it is to get here the first time.
Oh, absolutely.
And it is a highly competitive. And
Sounds
we all field trialers travel. Well, we don't go into Canada, but we spend plenty of time in North Dakota to Florida
Absolutely.
chasing this too.
Yeah.
Yeah. When you go up north during the summertime, it's usually cooler up there, lower humidity, so it's easy.
The season actually starts in August. Well, a lot of people don't realize this. To get here, it starts in August.
They have lots of game birds up there too to help train the dog early, and then they gradually move south as the winter comes.
One thing I want to know. What is your most memorable performance before we run out of time here?
Oh, gosh, that would probably be the second time that Whippoorwill Rebel won the national championship in 1989. He won it in 1987. And if there was a second-place dog in 1988 when Navajo's
And there's not a second place.
There's no
It's
runner-up.
all or nothing.
And so if there was a second-place dog, he would have won. He'd been runner-up in 1988. But then Mr. Tate Klein owned that dog, and he came into the office one day over there, and this was before the deadline, before December 31st, when you had to go ahead and decide, if you were going to run or not. But back in this day, in 1989, when a dog won, he was qualified for life.
Okay.
So he didn't have to have a placement to come back in. But Mr. Tate came into the office, and Dr. Anderson and I were there, my predecessor, and he said, he looked at me and he says, "Doc, I need to talk to you and Dr. Anderson." And I said, "Okay." And so we went into the office, and he sat down, and he said, "I want to run Jake." Jake was a call name for Whippoorwill Rebel. And I said, "You want to run Jake?" And he says, "Yes." He said, "He has 4 offspring running in the national championship this year, and I just want the old man to run with a chillin'." And I thought, okay, here we go. I said, "Miss Tate," I said, "Have you worked that dog any?" And he says, "Oh, no. He's been a house dog." And I says, "Well, don't you think it'd be nice to get that dog on the ground, get conditioned and be able to go 3 hours?" He said, "Oh, I'm not worried about that. I just want the old man to run with the chillin'." And he said, "Okay." And so, sure enough, Tommy Davis had handled a dog before, and he had already won with 3 different dogs up to that point. And so Tommy put that dog on the ground. Well, lo and behold, the chillin' didn't do anything.
Wow.
But Whippoorwill Rebel came out there, old Jake came out there, and he knocked out 13 fines in 3 hours. He ran a stob through one of his I think it was his right front foot, with about 10 minutes to go. And Tommy got off his horse and took his handkerchief out and pulled the stob out of his foot, took a handkerchief and wrapped around that dog's foot and tapped him on the head, and he took off again, and he had another fine right there at the end. And this was what was so unique about this thing, is it was at the end of the Morgan field, just north of the field trial stables next to Ellington Road. And the dog went into a cut in the woods, and you could see him in there probably 50 yards. And so we rode up to the outside. Well, the judges were the only ones that were going to get to ride in that little cut to observe the dog, and the gallery had to stand to the outside and kind of watch what was going on. And so as Tommy got off his horse and he was going to walk in there, he got up a covey of birds, and everybody hollered, "There's your birds, there's your birds." And Tommy just kind of looked around at the judges, and he just walked right on down there to the dog, walked right out in front of that dog, and flushed a huge covey of birds right in front of the dog. And he turned around, looked at the judge, and says, "Those are my birds." And the gallery just immediately started clapping. That's the first time I'd heard an applause for a dog during the national championship. But that was so cool.
That's awesome. That is awesome.
And I got to ask one more, because we've had some characters over the years here. Some handlers, or it can be a handler, or it can be some of our other, how do I say, clientele that we have. But what's memorable about that over your career? 40 years of here.
Oh, gosh.
I know Calvin Davis has got to be in there somewhere, because he's memorable to me. But
Calvin's in there several times. But some of the best braces have been watching Calvin and Robin run against each other, because they grew up together and they grew up competing together, and so they're always ragging one another. And I mean, it's in your face, and they just have a ball. And so they've done that years after years, and they were braced together in one morning brace that was the most comical, I think. But it was every find that they had. And a lot of times a handler, when they're competing, this is supposed to be a gentleman's sport, is what they say.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be a gentleman's sport, but sometimes one handler, if he has the other dog has a find, he's going to try to get away from him as quickly as he can and put him behind and make him catch up. Well, when you have to catch up, then it takes energy out of that dog to catch up, and so he may not have energy at the end of the 3 hours to make it. But those
sometimes it's a little defense as much as offense.
Absolutely. But these two, if one pointed, the other one slack up and wait on him. And if they had a dog that pointed together and are close to one another, they would always wait on, very respectful of one another in that regards. They would wait on one another. But one of the best stories that I've got, you talking about Calvin Davis, I judged a trial with Calvin up at Clarksville, Tennessee. And
which is still a wild bird trial. We don't have many of those, but
absolutely.
It still is.
On military grounds up there. And so anyway, we were there, and Calvin told me about going into a Walmart. He was going to get some airborne to take, and he didn't know that the airborne were like Alka-Seltzers that fizzed, and they had told him to get those Alka-Seltzers because it would help him, with stuff. And so walking back up to the counter, he just opened the box and popped a couple in his mouth. Well, he gets up to the counter, and those things are fizzing in his mouth, and they're coming out his nose and his mouth, and he looked like he was rabid, And so the cashier looks at him and says, "Are you okay?" And, whoop, 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 whoop. And he said he walked outside, and everybody's backing up and clearing the way. They're getting out of his way. So that's a Calvin Davis story.
Yeah, but he's always a character. So
he is that.
If you're watching this, the Nationals going on, you can check out the Ames Plantation website. They give updates daily. Also, the Facebook page will have updates. And
we have a website, www.amesplantation.org.
And I think their Facebook is Ames Plantation, at Ames Plantation, so easy to find it.
You do give updates on performances and photos from the day, so if you want to just follow along, it's a great experience.
Yeah, awesome. Well, appreciate you, Dr. Carlisle, and thanks for having us here. We'll have to
do
another show with you, and we'll talk a little bit more about the history around us. How's that sound?
Sounds good.
All right. Well, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening, and keep coming back. This is Tennessee WildCast.
Thanks for tuning in. Stay connected with TWRA by visiting our website at tnwildlife.org and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Hey, it's all about Tennessee wildlife. It's what we do. Tennessee WildCast will be on the air again next week. We'll see you then.